Okay, everyone, welcome back to Cat Tales, without the cat, of course. I didn't bring one. A couple of weeks ago, we filmed a story called The Courage of Sarah Noble. Now, that was mostly an historic fiction, but I have a wonderful tale to share with you right now, and it's the story about Kate Shelley. And this is an absolutely true story. Kate Shelley lived in Iowa back, a little more than 100 years ago. And the story takes place on July 16th, 1881 in Moingana, Iowa. 15-year-old Kate Shelley pulled the sheets from the line. A terrible storm was coming in. Kate could feel it in the air. A cold wind rose as she carried the basket back into the house. Black clouds rolled in and the sky grew dark. Kate stood in the kitchen window with her younger sisters and her brother. They heard the lightning flash and the thunder crack in the hills. And then the rain came, and it came, and it came, and it came. And as the rain poured down, they watched the water rising in Honey Creek right in their yard. Soon, it overflowed the banks, and it flooded everything. "I'm going to let the animals out of the barn," Kate said. "If the water keeps rising, they're going to drown." "Be careful you don't slip in the water," said her mother. Kate ran down the hill, and she waded through the muddy waters to the barn. She let out the horses to the upper ground behind the house, and then she let the cows out, and they ran up the hill. Finally, she grabbed two little piglets, and she carried them into the house. By this time, she was soaked to the skin. Kate put on dry clothes, and she went back to the window. The rain had not let up. The floodwater was coming closer and closer to the house. And when the lightning flashed, Kate looked out and she could see the railroad tracks. They ran along the side of Honey Creek. She peered through the rain, trying to see the railroad bridge over Honey Creek. How would it hold up over the storm? Would it hold up, or would it crash into the river? After supper, the younger children went to bed. Her sister, 9-year-old Mame, wanted to stay awake with Kate and her mother. They sat at the kitchen window, talking about the dangers of the storm. They were worried about the men who would be working out there on the railroad. And they knew that at midnight there would be an express train coming toward the Moingana station without stopping. They knew that the train would have to cross the Des Moines River, and then it would cross over the bridge by Honey Creek near Kate's house. Were the bridges safe? Would they hold? Shortly after 11 o'clock, Kate and her mother heard an engine coming slowly down the track. They knew that it was the railroad men on the engine walking along to see if the railroad train would be safe. They were checking the bridges and the tracks along the way to see what was flooding. And they were headed toward the bridge on Honey Creek. Suddenly, the engine bell rang wildly, and Kate heard a terrible crack, and she knew at once that the bridge over Honey Creek had fallen into the creek. She heard the hot engine hiss as it hit the cold water. She jumped to her feet. "Mother, Mother, the engine has gone down in Honey Creek. I must go to help." The crash woke the children, and they watched silently as Kate pulled on her jacket and she pulled on her old straw hat, and then she lit her father's lantern. "You can't go, Kate," said her mother. "It's much too dangerous." "I have to go," said Kate. "Mother, if it was Father down in that creek, you would want someone to help, wouldn't you, Mother?" Yes, you could. But please take care. Be careful." Kate could not go across their flooded front yard, for the water had risen too high. So she started up on the path behind the house. There she could go and reach the tracks where it ran through the hills. Water poured down the hillside, but Kate climbed over the trees. Her skirt caught in the brambles, and her shoes sank in the mud. But she held her father's railroad lantern, and she kept going. And at last, she reached the tracks. She ran back down along the tracks till she got to the broken bridge. She looked out over the waters of Honey Creek. Were the crew there? Had they drowned? Then she heard a shout in the storm, and she was not sure, but she listened. Someone was calling. Lightning flashed, and Kate saw someone holding the branches of a tree in the flooded waters of Honey Creek. She could hear the two men now, but she couldn't make out their words. "Hang on," she shouted. "I'll get help." And she swung the lantern so that the men would know that she was there and that she was going for help. She turned around and began to run along the tracks toward the railroad station. There wasn't much time. She had to reach the station before the midnight express train came through. She ran along the tracks, but even before she reached the Des Moines River, she could hear the floodwater rushing along. She held the lantern up to light her way over the bridge, but as she did, a fierce wind blew the lantern's flame out. Kate stared into the darkness because to reach the station, she would have to cross the long wooden bridge over the Des Moines River. There were tracks going across, and there was a narrow walkway on the side, but there was no handrail. Kate was afraid to go across that bridge, even in the daylight in calm weather. Could she cross it now? Could she cross it in the dark with no lantern? But she thought of the men in Honey Creek waiting for her to return, and she thought of all the people coming in on the express train. So she got down on her hands and knees, and she began to crawl across the walkway. There were boards missing, and she had to feel for gaps in the walkway as she went along. Nails and splinters cut her hands and her knees and grabbed at her skirt as she crossed. She was afraid that at any moment the wind would sweep her over the side into the river. Trees and logs and the flooded water crashed under the bottom of the bridge and shook it as she crawled along. And then, when she reached the middle of the bridge, lightning flashed, and suddenly it lit up the night, and she looked, and she saw a huge tree floating down in the floodwater. Surely it was headed right toward her, and it would crash into the bridge. Kate held on tight and waited for the tree to hit, but just as it did, the floodwater pulled it down under the bridge. She could feel it scraping the walkway underneath, and then it was gone. Kate was shaking with fear, but she couldn't stop to rest. She knew it was almost midnight. She held on to her hat in the wind, and she knew that she had to reach the station to stop the express train. At last, her hand touched the land. She had crossed the river. The Montgoina station was only about a half a mile ahead of her. Her feet shot up and she began to rain. Her heart pounded and her throat ached, but through the rain she could see the lights of the station. She threw open the door when she got there. The men turned inside to look at her. Her clothes were dripping and muddy and torn, and she was out of breath, and she gasped and couldn't speak. "Girl must be crazy," one of the men said. But one of the other men working there recognized her. "What, Kate? What's wrong?" "The bridge," she said. "The bridge is out. Stop the train." "We must stop the express," said the man. And he ran to the telegraph and he tapped out the message. "Stop express. Stop express. Bridge out. Bridge out. Stop express." Another man grabbed a lantern and he ran out to the platform, and he would flag the train down if he could by hand if the message did not get on it, for there were 200 people headed that way on the express. Kate's warning had come in time. The railroad men stopped the train in Ogden. But it was the last telegraph message to go out, for the storm blew the lines down for 40 miles around the station. Someone helped Kate into a chair, and she relaxed and caught her breath. "But there are 2 men still alive," she said. "2 men in Honey Creek. I saw them holding on to the trees." "We'll go save them," a man said. "Would you help us, Kate? Would you show us where they are?" So they got on an engine and they rowed back across the Des Moines River, the same bridge that Kate had crawled over on hand. The train engine stopped at the broken bridge by Honey Creek. Everyone shouted, and the men answered. They were still there, but there was no way to reach them on that side. So Kate led the rescue party up behind her house and down on the other side. Then they crossed Honey Creek and they rescued the 2 men. Kate went home that night and she slept for a very long time. When she awoke, friends, family, neighbors from miles around came to hear her story. They wanted to hear about her adventures. Reporters came, and newspapers all around the country spread the story of Kate Shelley. There were poems written and stories told about her, and the state of Iowa even awarded her a gold medal. The railroad gave her a job, and they made a stopping point right in front of Kate's house. That was her favorite thing. So if you liked this story about Kate Shelley and you have some time, Google her name and find out about her. Look at the map and find out where Iowa is and the Des Moines River. There's plenty to do when you have a good story to listen to. Thank you.